has not one, not two, but 3 DTMs. Like Lark, he is a Toastmaster lifer. Today, his perspective is from his role in our district as our youth leadership chair. Please help me welcome Dan Grudtner as he talks about our youth leadership program.
It was 7 years ago when I was going for my third DTM that I decided that I wanted to challenge myself, not just mentor or sponsor a club. I wanted to lead a youth leadership program. That was my challenge. How was I going to find a group? I don't belong to a church, so that wasn't an avenue. I don't have any kids. I'm not in school, so that would have been a difficult place to find one. I started to look around. I was at the St. Paul Saints game, downtown St. Paul, and I looked and I saw there was a group of teenagers over there. Opportunity! Off I went to talk to them. I explained what I wanted to do, and they said, well, our executive director is right over there. Thanks. Off I went to talk to the executive director. I explained what I wanted to do, and she said, this would be a wonderful fit for us because what we're doing is teaching kids to get jobs and retain jobs. Communication and leadership would be right up our field. We exchanged information. I went there and visited with them. And then we started our first youth leadership program at Urban Roots on the east side of St. Paul that winter. Now, what is youth leadership program? Well, we heard Lark talking quite a bit about speechcraft. They have a book where you can follow step by step. And for the same thing, for youth leadership, they have a coordinator's guide along with workbooks for the participants. It too can be in a 4, 6, or 8-week course. So speechcraft and youth leadership share many similarities, but they share some key differences. The similarities are that the participants give speeches, give evaluations, participate in table topics. But youth leadership program is a self-contained program that's outside of the club. Now, as you know, youth, you have to be 18 to join Toastmasters, to join your club. And this is the only way that minors can participate in the great program we know as Toastmasters. So what happens in the youth leadership? So I had to finish my thought. The main difference is that we have leaders in the youth leadership program. We elect officers. I'll get back to that in a minute. What happens in a typical meeting? The first meeting, you have a get to know you. It's an exercise, and I had a co-coordinator. And let me tell you, I would not do a youth leadership without a co-coordinator. There's multiple reasons, because you get someone to talk about with it. You have someone to take some of the pressure off. If you happen to be able to not make a meeting, you have your co-coordinator will be able to be there. At the first meeting, also, after you have the get to know you exercise, you start to explain speeches. You have an educational speech. You know the program. Opening, body, conclusion. Tell them what you're going to tell them. Tell them what you told them. That's one of the multiple educational speeches. You have an educational speech at every meeting going forward. The educational speeches will be on vocal variety, gestures, table topics, impromptu speaking, Write down the list, everything that we're familiar, everything we learn about in Toastmasters. So once you go through that, you figure out who of the participants are going to give their speech at the next meeting. You have to do some convincing because they're all like, wait a minute, that's way too soon. Well, hopefully if you have about, say, 15 participants, you want to have at least 6. And you really don't want to have more than 20 because it gets unwieldy. You can, Toastmasters says 25. My experience, I think that'd be a little bit high. You want it, so say we have 15. You want to have 5 of them give their speech at the next meeting. 5 of them will give evaluations. Well, you'll give one and 4 of the others will give evaluation. And then the rest, and if there's time, we'll do table topics. So once you get people convinced to give their speech, now you can move on. Now's where the leadership part comes in. Just like in our Toastmaster Club, we set up leaders. You have the president, vice president, secretary, and sergeant at arms for our youth leadership program. We have to have an election. You'll have 2 slates. On one slate, you'll have the participants nominate somebody to be president for slate A and someone to be president for slate B. And you go down, who's going to be represent vice president on this slate, vice president on this slate, secretary, sergeant at arms. So you have slate A and slate B. You have everybody tear off a piece of paper and write down A or B and put it in the slot. And then the co-coordinators, you take a break. Co-coordinators will get together and add up, count the ballots. For one of my youth leadership, I did it for 3 years. So I'm set for the next 2 DTMs. For one of them, we had a tie. Every slate had voted for themselves. We had to break the tie. We don't tell them it was a tie. We just make the decision, okay, who's going to be the best one to start? And then right from then, once you make the announcement, the person who's president of the winning slate is the moderator of the Toastmaster meetings from then on. They do the introduction of the speakers, they introduce the evaluators, they lead the business meeting. That's where they are learning leadership. Hopefully they know a little bit about parliamentary procedure, and that can be one of your speeches, your educational speeches, is how does parliamentary procedure work? We've all had some exposure to it, but it's always fun to expand our knowledge when we have to teach others. You'll go through the program like that week after week. I found 8 weeks to be just right. I found that the 2 hours worked good for me because those 2 hours just filled up like nobody's business. And if you can do it in an hour, more power to you, depending on how many participants you have. Once you start getting through closer to the end, you start thinking about the conclusion of it, and you have a show your skills. This can be any number of formats. You can continue on with the same format, speeches and table topics, but you can spice it up with a parliamentary procedure. Let's make a motion. Let's take amendments. You have to make a motion, second the motion, discuss it, make amendments, and then keep track. Are you on the amendment or are you on the motion? That can be pretty fun to just try and work your way through that. So what we did for one of those was to have half of it would be a motion and the other half would be featured speakers. Now, when you get all done with the 8-week course, you have a special event. The special event takes place after the 8 weeks. That's when you are going to invite people to come and show and see what you've learned, see how you've improved. They can invite family members. You can invite your teachers. If you're at an organization like Urban Roots, you would invite the staff. You can also invite dignitaries like elected officials. I kept trying to get the city council lady who was representing that area to come, and oh, she loved the idea. She so wanted to be there. But wouldn't you know, we kept scheduling it on the night that they had city council, so she couldn't ever make it. Finally, the third time we were doing it, I invited the mayor. He said, well, I'd love to be there. This is such a great program that you're doing. But he had already had a prior engagement. But what he did was he put together a special certificate for each one of the participants with their name on it. They all said the same thing, that you are doing such a wonderful thing participating in this. You are going to be model citizens of St. Paul. You should be very proud of yourself. He stamped it with the seal of the mayor and signed it, Melvin Carter. What a treat to be able to not only pass out certificates of participation to each participant, but also this personalized letter from the mayor. One of the years they wanted to do table topics, and that can be either you lead in the table topics or they've learned to start leading table topics, where they not only ask themselves questions, they start to ask the audience questions. They wanted to see some of their parents take a table topic and answer it and see how they did. They wanted to ask some of their workers or their teachers. This is also a good time for you to have your club attend also with you. Now remember, you were using them to come in and do some of the educational speeches. And that works really well to help give them variety of people to listen to. This is a club-sponsored exercise, the Youth Leadership Program. The club can help defray the cost, as well as the district is willing to defray the cost of it. And then when they come, the club comes, the kids, the participants are already familiar with some of them, and they can ask them some of the questions on how and see how they do as a professional lifer Toastmaster. And it's usually done at a time when they can provide a buffet. Now at Urban Roots, where they do, they're working to give people, the participants, jobs in the field, growing food. Then another part of it is taking the food and preparing the food and cooking it and serving it. And a third part is marketing the food. What a great fit to have a buffet from this organization. Many of the youth prepared the food during the day and then served it at the buffet. What a treat. Grilled vegetables, nothing better. Now, one of the things that I know that people sometimes have a bad perception of teenagers. We worry, we see some kid did a bad thing in the news and we think, oh. My experience is that the vast majority of youth are good people. My experience from leading this youth leadership is that they are there to learn. They want to be there. They're on their best behavior. Yes, you're going to have some that are more engaged than others. Just like at our Toastmaster group, we're all different. We all have different members. But watching them grow from week to week to week, from the beginning to the end, is so rewarding. Some of the stories you hear, many in my group were immigrants. They got to talk about their travels from abroad to living in the United States. Now, as I told you before I leave, Youth Leadership Program will fulfill one of your 6 requirements on the DTM application. If you haven't printed out your Distinguished Toastmaster Award application, you may want to start that from now so you can start filling that out and see what you need. This does fill one of those 6 requirements. What's nice about the youth leadership program, you don't have to wait for permission from the district. You don't have to wait for permission from Toastmasters International. You don't need a blessing. All you need to do is get your material, get your participants, and go. And you will get your credit when you're done. My email is dan.grudtner@gmail.com. You don't have to remember that, because every month I have an article in the district newsletter with my contact information in there. So you don't have to remember it today. You know where to find it later. I'm also in the directory, the District 106 directory. I know we all have busy lives. I get it. But what we do with our time, how we prioritize our time, is up to us. What's important to us? I believe in Toastmasters. I believe it can change people's lives for the better. What better way to change lives than for youth that are young and impressionable and learning and soaking up information? I urge you to consider doing a youth leadership program, if not this year, soon. Put it on your bucket list. Back to you, Toastmaster Brian Nordling.